Okay, so I've had a couple of people ask me about the Furbies. Uh, I will try to explain like disassembly. Uh, to be clear, my disassembly process focuses on customizing, not uh, refurbishing the Furby as it already is. So it's going to get new fur, it's going to get new everything. So I'm just going to simply show you how to take it apart, not how to clean it or any of that stuff. There's a lot of other tutorials out there if you need such a thing. I do recommend having like a bowl or something around to catch all the little bits and pieces as you go through here. There's a lot of screws and plastic parts and all this other stuff that's in this. This is a complicated little boy. Okay, so first you're gonna want to take off the bottom. Let's see here. And the model I'm working with is a 2016 Connect model. This one is quite dead. It came from a loving home. Obviously, if there were batteries in this. If there's batteries in it, you don't want to do disassembly when you've got batteries in, just to be safe. So take your batteries out. If you want to ensure functionality of the Furby as you're going along, find a stopping point, pop the batteries back in, and make sure it's still working, but I wouldn't leave them in. Okay, so once you've got it open, here's the bottom. Set that aside. You'll see that there are little screws in each of these little holes. They all need to come out. So let's take those out. Put them into our little bowl here. Now, fortunately, I have been able to keep some of these guys alive through the customization process. It's very easy to mess up the sensors on the inside, so you have to be really careful as you do this. It took me a long time to figure out. I'm still not great at it, to be totally honest with you. Sometimes, I don't know if it's because this model was Bluetooth compatible or what the deal was, but they're just very complicated internally. Frankly, I have the easier job as a customizer who's intending to scrap a lot of this anyway. If you are intending to disassemble, clean, and reassemble one of these, it can be quite the undertaking. You want to have a gentle hand when you're doing stuff like that. Okay, here's the last screw. Okay, and when you've got all these screws out, this piece right here lifts off. So just take that off, set it aside. And this fur is, I'm doing this assuming that whoever is watching this has never done this before. It's easier. This fur is bolted down on like spikes, plastic spikes. You want to gently lift off the fur from those spikes. Do not stab yourself. It has happened to me before. So you can pull the fur. It's connected with an elastic band right here. You can pull the fur back and you'll notice there is a ribbon right here. Now, if you're a customizer, you can just cut the ribbon because I don't need this fur again. If you want to put the fur back on, this just helps keep the fur latch down. It also connects to a piece on the inside. You might want to keep it intact. You can lift it up and off of this little spike, but for me, I'm just gonna cut it. Goodbye. And then the fur peels up. Just peel it up gently. Now, watch in the front here. There's a red wire. That red wire hooks in to this little guy. If you gently pull on it, very gently, you will see that it will yank out a little connector. This connector comes apart and it's made to click in and out. So you want to make sure to unhook that. Just like that. Now it's two wires. So the skin is not hooked into the internal mechanisms. This sounds very worrisome when I'm describing it in this way. So there's a plate, a plastic plate that is hooked in to the main body and also has holes in it to sew it to the skin. It is both attached to the skin and hooked into the body. There are screws on the bottom. Let's go ahead and take those out. And dealing with this plate is honestly the hardest part of the process, because if you just yank on the plate, you're liable to warp something, tear something. It's kind of a hassle. So again, I'm a customizer. I don't need this to be fully functional anymore. We're just sort of treating it like it is. I'm going to cut out the tabs on the faceplate. That's what hooks into the main body. There are little tabs on this plastic piece. I think if you were just wanting to clean the Furby and put it back, you could probably get away with cutting these tabs off anyway, so long as you didn't like lose them in the body cavity. Because this plate has screws on the bottom, I think the plate will stick in just fine. You can kind of just click it in. You could even glue it back on if you wanted to, if you don't intend to remove it anymore. So just be aware of that this is some permanent disfiguring we're starting to get into. So there's tabs on the side right there. I'm just gonna cut it. These little snippers are the best thing for this job, I've found. And also, as you start really digging into this fur tends to go everywhere. Just be aware of that. Wear a shirt you don't care about, I guess. There's also tabs and a plastic piece hooked into the ears, where the ears are. So you want to cut those too. It won't hurt the ears. Right here at the bottom, at the base of the ears is where those are. We're gonna cut both of those. Be careful of any wires. There's wires all over this thing and little sensors. You don't wanna mess with any of that. Let's see if I can do this without stabbing myself. There we go. Clicks right out. Now, I'm lifting this up slowly. This piece, this fur piece, it's the center of the face when you're looking at the Furby straight on, also has a tab that hooks right into the face. This tab you can either cut off, or I find this particular one I can kind of yank out. Again, don't tug on it too much if you don't want to, because it could warp the plastic. Especially if you're intending to reassemble this. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it just to follow my own advice. And again, I think you could glue this down, or frankly, it's the same shape. It sits into a groove. It'll just click right back on without the tabs. I think it would be okay. All right, so the center of the face is lifted. There's also tabs above the eyes. So we want to cut those. They're difficult to get to because you've got so much fur and stuff in the way at this point. Again, I'm trying not to warp this faceplate. I'm just going to get in there and cut them. Hopefully. And the reason I'm going to so much trouble, despite the fact that I don't intend to use any of this fur, is that I think the little faceplate, the plastic piece that I'm currently yanking up off this thing, is helpful for the new fur. I'm going to give this new fur, and I'm going to sew, well, just attach this faceplate into the new fur to help it keep shape to the body. I think it really helps. That way I'm not having to glue a bunch of stuff down because that can have some weird effects. I just think it's helpful, especially since I keep the internal pieces of the body. I know a lot of people with older models of Furbies just take the faceplates off, or make their own faceplates or whatever. I think that's super cool, but it's not really a possibility here. I've never, obviously this faceplate is it's a lot of pieces. I've never seen one out in the wild that you could just attach. If you have, please let me know, because that would make my life a lot easier. Okay, so it's unattached from the tops of the eyes. Now, since I'm cutting these tabs, that means there's little blue tabs everywhere. Just put them in the bowl and keep them on the side. You don't need them. Okay, so now the mangling begins. This is where the fur is really gonna start going everywhere. Again, I don't intend to keep this fur, so I'm going to cut down the side seam here to lift it up over the ears. Because there's plastic on the bottom of those ears, you can't just lift up the fur. It's not like with old Furbies, where you can kind of lift the fur up and lift the ears off. The ears are made of plastic. They're hooked into the internal mechanism. The plastic is sewn around the ears. You can't just yank it up and over. For someone who was intending to disassemble this and reassemble it, you could probably go in with a seam ripper on this plastic piece and maybe try and get it up and off, would be my suggestion. If there's somebody else who's figured out a better way to do that, for somebody intending to keep the Furby as it was originally, definitely link to it anywhere if you find this video, because I'm really not focused on that process. Frankly, these are so complicated internally, I would be kind of afraid to attempt such a thing. Okay, here we go. Cut down. I'm gonna cut into this little tab a little bit. Be careful not to cut the ears. Right, and there the fur has parted. The ears are visible. You can lift it up, peel it back. The fur, the little tabs, the plastic tabs are also connected on the other side of the ear, the inside of the ear. Again, just cut them off. And sorry if I accumulate an entire dog's worth of fur on the shirt somehow. These things shed like nobody's business. Okay, we're gonna do the same for the other ear. Just cut down the side. There we go. And I'm going to, I'm sure I'm making weird faces, sorry. I'm going to cut the little plastic piece. Snip. I said snip, darn it. It's fighting me. There we go. And cut in on the other side of the ear. Kind of push the ear down. Get in there. Now the faceplate I keep, the earpieces I do not. So those I'm a little less careful with. I'm really more interested in the faceplate and the main body of the beast, not so much this external stuff. Okay. Now, this model has a dealy bopper on the top. That's your Bluetooth connectivity, sensor, light, joystick. It does a lot of stuff. That sensor is also hooked in. It's hanging by the sensor right now. Again, by plastic tabs. Just cut them. And you can kind of lift the fur up and off. Here's the fur. I guess you could maybe do this process, wash it and sew it back up. I'm not super certain. That seems like such an undertaking to me. Okay, I'm just gonna put it in a bag because it sheds. So there's that. Okay, here's what we have. And my best advice is to take the tape up. This tape stuff down here, these are the sensors. They've all got wires in them. Take them up, take the tape off, and kind of rearrange them, because as you start disassembling those, if you start yanking on those wires, they're very easy to pull and shred and do a bunch of stuff. So I would just take the time to scrape up this tape. I find it really helps in the disassembly process. Here we go. There's that. And just kind of let them hang if you can. Here's the next one. Maybe tweezers could also help with this process if you're prone to struggling like I am. And there's one more on the other side. So let's take that off. Okay, so 3 sensors all off. Now is when you're going to uncouple the front from the back of the housing. There's 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now unscrew those. I find that at least one of these is always stripped for some reason. It's weird for an internal screw to be stripped, but that's always how it goes for me. Throwing things around here. See, this is why you have the little bowl. Helpful. Okay, 2. 3. 4. Okay, so back component will just lift right off, and it doesn't connect to anything. You can just set it aside. And here is the belly of the beast. So this is where it gets really complicated and frankly prone to blowing up on you. It is definitely possible to keep your Furby alive through this process, but it's rough. My suggestion is, if you have a dead one, practice on the dead one. That will just get you more familiar with the internal process of these little guys. So all your sensors are connected to one side. I suggest just kind of taping them on to the side or the face, just adhesing them a little bit, just so that they're not dangling and in your way as you're going through this. Tape those right there. The first thing I want to address is the speaker on the side. The speaker is not like glued in or screwed in. It literally just hangs out in here. So as soon as you take the back off, it's loose in the wind. This will be hard to see. This wire connects into a circuit board in the front. The circuit board is again connected by those little connectors that you can take in and out. My suggestion is to just take out the speaker. Unhook it from that connector. Be very gentle about it. See? Right like that. And set your speaker aside. You can reconnect it later. And I find it helpful to like take pictures of where things connect, so that if I need to reconnect them, I can actually know where. Because this, I'm not like super into toys or electronics or anything like that, so this looks like gobbledygook to me. It doesn't make sense. So I have to take like individual pictures to figure out where things go back in. And at this point, we're just going to start disconnecting wires. These wires over here connect to your dealy bopper on top. So let's disconnect these wires. Again, just gently yank them out. Gently, there we go. This always feels like I am doing something I should not be, but it's fine. Okay, there's your wires. Now your dealy bopper is loose in the wind, so just take them off, put them down. So there's a light right here. This is the light that lights up your dealy bopper. I don't know what the technical term for it is, sensor, and that's connected to a little chip. These wires that feed into it just kind of hook in. They kind of hook in under this little black piece right here. You can just kind of unhook them from that and take it all out. So that's what we're gonna do next. Just start unhooking wires. Get them all out of there. And, oh, yeah, now I see why this one's dead. It's grody inside, but that's okay. It makes for a good lab experiment for this video. So as you start unhooking this stuff, this circuit board is gonna move. You can kind of slide it out. And that's your goal, is to slide it out of its housing here. And again, just go slow, be delicate with it. There we go, right like that. This wire hooks into the front, it hooks into this button. These wires hook into the side here. If you can get your fingers in there, you can disconnect this from this side circuit board. My fingers are too chunky to get into all of this stuff while it's still hooked into the face. So we're gonna take care of that. So here's my next suggestion. The next thing I like to move on from this point is actually these connectors here. And this mechanism is important because this is what enables the Furby to move. It dances from side to side. If you don't put these back, it will not dance. It will flail. So again, be careful taking these apart. Be careful putting them back on. Make sure you've got them reconnected correctly. Fortunately, this bottom plastic white piece is not hooked into any electronics per se. It's just plastic. So as long as you don't warp the plastic or the springs that are in these little legs, it should be fine to take apart. Let's do that. And the reason I'm doing this is just to give myself more room. The next set of screws that I'm gonna reach are kind of down in there. And that's what hooks the face into this. And we need that to come off. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of space. Okay. There we go. All right. So those pieces have come off. This is now an empty space right here. There's a screw in this empty space right there. We want to unhook that screw. That's the screw for the bottom of the face. So let's undo that one. This is always a difficult screw to get into. It doesn't like me very much, but that's okay. And it's just kind of a weird angle. So it can take some doing, which is why we took all that stuff off. You want to give yourself as much room as you can. Wouldn't it be weird if I like couldn't do this and I made the video? That would be super exciting, wouldn't it? I'd be so thrilled if that happened. I guess this is why nobody customizes this model, because it's kind of testy. There we go. There we go. All right. Push that screw out. We're gonna just tap it. There she is. I won. The rest of them are easier. All right. There's a screw here and a screw right beneath the ear on the other side. Those need to come out as well. Those hook the circuit board in to the face. Here we go. There's one. Don't lose the screw in the body. I do that all the time, and then it's exciting later. Okay. Now, we should be free and clear to just, yep. So here we go. The main face portion just comes off. Now remember, you've got wires and stuff kind of hooked in. So you want to take that off delicately, unhook stuff. Don't just yank this plate off. Take your time to make sure none of the wires, because they hook into these little mechanisms right here. Make sure none of that stuff's still latched in. You could just lift it off the little hooks and set that aside. Now we're left with this very naked Furby, very naked and floppy. This is why those other connecting pieces were important. That's what enables it to sort of right itself. So be a little floppy boy for right now. And honestly, you could probably stop here if you wanted to. Like, you've done enough at this point that if you were gonna skin something, you've got the plates off to make a pattern if you need to. You can get into some of the internal mechanisms, clean them up. I actually always go a little bit further because I do customization to the eyes, so I want to get into those eyes. If you don't want to mess with the eyes, like you want to keep this, there's little screens in behind these eyes, just leave it alone. You can stop here and it'll be fine. But I'm going to go a little bit further. There's 2 screws here. Just take them out. This hooks the eye piece into the circuit board. There we go. Okay. Now, this part always feels a little messy. This isn't my favorite thing to do. This part isn't. And if any of these wires you find are getting in your way at any point, again, they all just kind of click in and out. Just take them off. So there's another screw on the back side of this face. There's a side chipboard here, and there's a screw. It's hard to demonstrate at this angle. Next to this little plastic piece, this plastic connector, there's a screw that needs to come off as well. That also connects into the eye piece. So you don't want to go yanking on it until all these screws are out. And you'll kind of feel it get loose a little as you start going through this. So the next portion of this, you can see, there we go. And it doesn't feel good to do that. You want to yank firm enough to get the eyes out from under the eyelids without screwing up the eyelids. There's a spring in here, a little plastic piece that they're connected to make them go up and down, and you don't want any of that to bust. And B, again, you've got multiple chip boards here, and you don't want to mess with any of this wiring. But you can just, once you've got those 3 screws off, you can just kind of take the face off. Don't yank too hard, make sure those wires are still intact, but you can just kind of take it off. There are 2, this is such an awkward angle, there are 2 screws here that connect this circuit board to the eyes. So we're gonna take those off. It's a long process. I see why people don't do this. I might be mildly insane. Alright, so now that we've got those screws off, this eye piece will just kind of slide out, and there are multiple pieces to these eyes. So, and they're all going to kind of fall out into your hand, so be sure you're working over a surface or something like that. See, it's all falling. There's this piece. This just kind of goes in between the screens and the eyes. Here are the screens. They are not bolted down. They are floppy screens. They set into this piece just like this and go like this. So as soon as this piece comes out, these screens flop all over the place. Make sure they don't get damaged if you want to keep the eyes functional. For me, I think they get in the way, and again, I paint the eyes internally to the eyes so that they can have like kind of their own expression all the time, rather than being dark and off the way that these Furbies are when they're turned off. So I can just yank these off. They slide out. Now these are designed to slide out. If you have enough finesse, you can probably slide them back in. They have this little piece. This piece, it's kind of a harder plastic piece to the rest of it, and they slide in and out. If you have a busted one, like one of its eyes are busted, you may be able to replace them in this manner. I don't know that for sure, but that would be what I would try. There's the other one. So now we have a still fully intact Furby. There's nothing, like I said, this one had corroded batteries and stuff like that. He's pretty toast. But if you wanted to repair one, you could get it into this state and try and resolve its issues. I don't normally take them past this point. The only other thing that I would do is maybe address the ears. Again, as a customizer, the motorized stuff, especially for a dead Furby, I don't really need any of that stuff. So I might go ahead and take the ears out. This black thing contains the motor and stuff that moves the ears. The only other thing I want to note is this. Again, the eyes come in multiple pieces. There's a little pad here to keep the plastic from rubbing up against itself. The beak piece and the actual eyes, this is the eye, the front casing of the eye. They are all separate pieces. They are not interconnected. They will fall all over the place. So you want to make sure to set those aside. Let's go ahead and rescue the ears from this one since it's toast. I also don't normally reuse the eyelids in my designs, but this is where you would rescue the eyelids too if you were going to put them on to a non-functional custom, or if you just needed to remove them for whatever reason, if you didn't want a Furby that blinks, maybe, who knows, an eternally awake Furby. And the screws here, once you get to this point, are not hidden. They're very obvious, so you just want to start unscrewing stuff. I really don't want to touch any of this gunk. But, you know, whatever. What I'm calling the motor piece has, much like the Furby, it has basically a front and a back. So there's 4 screws. The most external screws, you just take those apart and it'll kind of slide apart on its own. He is grody. Okay. And they just literally pull apart. And the ears, again, fall out. There's a spring connected to these ears, and they're resting on a peg and a gear. You can see that the ears have little gear notches in them. All of that is a gear mechanism that will fall out. I find that the motor is a little too complicated for me to put back together. So if I'm keeping a Furby functional, I usually don't take the motor part to disassemble. But since this one's dead, it's heavy. So I'm just gonna rescue the ears, the main body, and the eyepieces, and use that for my custom, and discard the rest of this. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend getting into the internal pieces of the motors and the gears if you intend to keep it functional, because it's very, unless you really know what you're doing, and some of you might, it's very hard to keep it functioning after that. It's just too delicate, and I can never get them to slide back together correctly. So that's it. That's how you take your Furby apart without destroying any of the wires. My basic advice is just to go slow. Again, the wires are delicate and kind of interconnected to every piece of this. So it's not, you can't just lift off the fur and do what you need to do. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's definitely doable if you take your time. And now we have a little friend to customize. I've rescued this one. He was going to go in the garbage, and now he's going to have a second life as a long Furby. So I hope that answers any questions you might have. Again, I'm not an expert at this. It's just what I found works, and I'm a very destructive person, so I had to go through a couple of these to be able to do it without murdering the Furby. If you have any questions, let me know. Good luck customizing. Have a good one.